So in this video, I'm going to be doing the most rudimentary and basic parts of how I do my lamp working, which is going to be a brief explanation, not necessarily because nothing I do is brief, of my raw materials, and then I'm going to pull points. So this video is actually going to be very long, boring, but I do talk through most of it and explain exactly what I'm doing. So if you get bored really quick, or you really have no interest in sitting here listening to me babble and pull points for an hour, then you can just skip this video. But be sure to like and subscribe and comment. So I've had a couple questions about the entire process that I go through here to go from what is my raw material to my finished product here. And I'm going to just give a brief explanation of exactly how I do that, and then I'm going to show how I do it. I thought I already did that, but it's okay. I mean, shoot another video, why not, right? Content's content. When I purchase my glass, I purchase it from, it's an online supplier, but they're actually local. It's called UST Glass. They're right up in Bensalem. It's not that far of a ride away. Now, there's multiple different types and styles of tubing that I can purchase pre-made. Okay, so this is one style. This is called profile tubing. It has a profile. It's extruded with a profile inside of it, which I then turn into these. Okay. And that comes in multiple different sizes. This is inch and I think this is like inch and a half maybe. These are metric. So we're gonna say inch and a half. Metric system's a tool of the devil. This is 1 inch. This is what I make the smaller clear Christmas ornaments out of, that are just, they have, like, once again, this has got a profile tubing in it. Now, the other thing, and this is kind of important, and I'm going to show how I do this also because it's kind of cool, is this tubing actually comes in 5-foot lengths. For whatever reason, glass always comes in 5-foot lengths. Not 4-foot, 5-foot. So, you can also, it also comes in clear. This is clear. Now, the other thing is it comes in different wall thicknesses. Sadly, I don't have the thicker wall tubing here because I pulled it all into points yesterday. It's out in the garage. I don't feel like going out in the rain. So, the tubing thicknesses range from, well, once again, it's metric. It ranges from like 1.2 millimeter wall thickness to like 6 millimeter wall thickness. Now, and that also varies with the diameter of the tubing. So the glass that I prefer to use for my Christmas ornaments is 24.5 millimeter or 1 inch medium wall tubing, which has a 2.8 millimeter wall thickness. Before I can work with this tubing, I have to cut it, and I'm going to show how I cut the tubing. And there's 3 ways to cut it. You can flame cut it, you can saw cut it, or you can score and snap it. I prefer to score and snap. So this tube started out as 5 feet long. I scored it, I scored it, I heat shock it, and it snaps right in half. It's pretty cool, really. After I get the tubing to the correct size to work with, or more comfortable size to work with, I then pull it into what is called a point. Now, out here on the table here is our points. Now, these just happen to be 1.25 inch points. This is 1.25 inch heavy wall tubing. This is what I make marbles and pipes and some beads out of, but usually marbles is what I make I make with this particular product. Marbles and small pipes. Now, this is an end with the point cut off of it. So when I'm making a marble, I use this end of it, and I've showed that in one of my other videos how I do that. Now, the other thing is tubing comes in colors. Sadly, I can no longer get this tubing. This was some kind of deal. This is red. You can't get this anymore. So there's a very limited number of this tubing left anywhere. I wish I'd have bought more at the time. I also have some black, and I have some blue. The black is a little weird to work with. I'm not crazy about it. I bought this for a project that I'm not sure whether or not I'm actually going to finish, just because it's very difficult to work with. Now here's a piece of the 1-inch profile tubing pulled into a point also. Now, rods. The rods also come in different diameters. It's pretty simple. This is 1-inch rod. I use this to make lenses on marbles. I originally bought it to make glass dildos with, and nobody bought them. Shocking. So they all got turned into marbles. And now I have some of this left over. Not a lot, but I do have some of it left over. It's not, I don't particularly care for this 1-inch. It takes a long time to get hot, and once it does get hot, it kind of moves around a little bit too much for me at my skill level to work with on a easy basis. So my preference is to use 12mm rod. It's a little bit easier to work with for me, so I use a lot of 12mm rod. I use a ton of this, which is 3mm rod. This is about the thickness of a piece of spaghetti. I use this for handles. I use this for pulling excess glass off. I use it for designs when I'm using silver or gold infumed product or pieces. I use this. It's good for casing. This is 6mm rod. I use this for the same thing that I use the 3mm for. It's just a bigger diameter. I actually prefer to use this. It's a little bit heavier, but you get less in a case. That's another thing, is glass is generally sold by the case, by the pound. So however many pounds it comes to is what you're actually paying for. It comes in boxes like this, the numbers on the thing here, but it's not, you're not necessarily paying for the pieces, you're paying for the weight. So this is 26mm tubing, 2.8mm wall thickness, and it's 8.2 kilograms. Now, if you buy 4mm, it'll be 16 kilograms that you're paying for, but you still get the same number of pieces. So glass is sold by weight. And the other question I get all the time is color. How do I get the color? How do I get the colors? Now there's a lot of different ways to get the colors. I personally purchase color pre-made from a couple different suppliers. Glass Alchemy, North Star, Greasy Glass. There's all kinds of different, nowadays there's all kinds of different glass manufacturers that just make color. And color is very expensive. Color ranges anywhere in price from $26 a pound for the cobalts, the black, or they're not black, it's for the cobalt blues. That's about 26 bucks a pound. Now, if I was to do like this hyacinth, on the other hand, this is probably about $40 a pound, and the sparkle colors that I buy are $75 a pound. And quite frankly, a pound of glass is not a lot of glass. So I try to be very sparing with my color. The other way I get colors is to burn silver or gold in the flame. It creates a smoke or a fume that sticks to the glass. You then cover it with clear and you get all kinds of different colors. It's a rainbow of colors. I don't even totally fully understand how it works. But that's one of the ways to do it. Whenever I fume something, I never know how it's going to turn out. The glass, the points are heated. So one of the things I do, and this is called a stringer. So you have the color rod as purchased, and these come in all different diameters. So I have, these are like 6mm diameter. They come smaller, they come larger, and then they come in what are called knuckles. Knuckles are the beginning and the ends of the color, and knuckles are very expensive, but with knuckles you can do all kinds of crazy stuff. I've purchased knuckles in the past, and I've had limited success with them. And they're really expensive. So one of the things I do is I'll take a piece of clear rod, I'll coat the clear rod with the very expensive color, and then I'll pull it into a stringer. And the stringer I will then paint on the glass, or if I'm making an inside out piece, I'll paint it on the inside of the glass for like a pipe or something. Anything where you want real depth, you paint it on the inside of the glass and then add a little fume to it, because hot smokers just love that. It changes color the more dirty it gets. So that's it. I'm going to move the camera. I'm going to set it back up over by my torch, and I'm going to give a quick demonstration on how I pull, how I cut, how I flame score and cut, and then pull some points. Today's going to be a pull points day. I can pull probably 30 or 40 points in less than 2 hours. That's 30 or 40 Christmas ornaments, give or take. And that's how I do it. I'm not gonna, well, that's how I do it. I do like an assembly line. So I'll pull, one day I'll pull as many points as I can until they start getting crooked, because I'm getting tired. And then the next day I'll pull the stringers, and then depending on, usually that day it'll be the same day that I start actually making Christmas ornaments, which are these. In my other video, in my Uncle Fezzi's G-rated balls video, I go through the whole process of how I actually make a Christmas ornament. So, plus a couple of my other videos, I go through the whole process. So let's move the camera and we'll go from there. So real quick, I need to explain this also, because this was another question that's come up. And the question is, what is the weird color that you see when I'm blowing glass? Well, that weird color that you'll see whilst I'm actually blowing glass is a didymium filter that I put over the lens so you can actually see the process. Without the filter, the salt in the glass, the sodium, creates a bright orange flare which you can't see through. I've seen people blow glass without any eye protection, and quite frankly it's horrifying to me. So these are didymium lenses, didymium. These are from Aurora Lens. These are my first pair of glasses. These damn things are expensive. These are like $150 or $160. These are my new ones. These are Whaleware. I don't actually know what these are, but they work exponentially better. These also have a number 4 welder shade that you can flip down. And that's what you see me wear when I'm actually working. Because I'm too cheap to buy the actual filter that goes on the lens, I actually just tape these over the glass, so like that. It works well enough for what I'm doing. Also, if you were to come over to visit to watch, I would force you to wear these. If you don't wear protective lenses, it really does hurt your eyes. It's not fun. Now you'll notice I actually have a new add-on to my torch here. I've got this Marver that I just bought, which is really cool. I like it. It's working out relatively well for me. And then I have another torch here, but we're not going to use this torch today, I don't think. We're going to go with what I have. I put these heat sleeves on. When I put the hat on, keep my sweat out of my eyes, and it looks cool. At least my flaming martini Steves. So I have these heat sleeves. These are Kevlar. They're either Kevlar or Nomex. To be honest with you, I don't even know what they are. These might be Nomex, and they need to be washed because they smell funny. Now, hopefully my gas is on. The noise that you hear is a combination of things. It's a fan, and it's my oxygen condenser running at the same time. My oxygen condenser project, which if you watched any of it, is it's working relatively well. There's still a few kinks. It's a little bit of a delicate balance to get the thing to work right, But once that balance has been achieved, it works just fine. Now, so I'm going to use this rod here. I actually cleaned my bench off. I had crap everywhere. It was pretty ugly. So I use these heat sleeves not necessarily so much to protect my arms, which I do need to protect my arms because the torch gets really hot, and it's not even the torch that gets hot, it's the glass that gets hot. So the other thing is the cloth on the inside of my hand here allows me to spin the tubing a little bit better, especially when I'm using the rest here. Sorry for the camera angle. That's the widest view that I can get and still use that particular camera that I'm using. My GoPro is just not, my GoPro just does not have, it's just not happy. Okay. These on. Clean enough. So one of the things I'm going to do first, just because I think it's kind of cool and you never know when it's going to go sideways, is I'm going to score and cut a piece of glass using heat. It's the heat shock method. Now I already cut this glass once, so this, remember, this was originally 5 feet long, and now it's about 2.5 feet long, give or take a little. So, what you do is, I'm just going to arbitrarily pick a spot in the middle here. Now this is a glass cutting tungsten carbide bit. It's not the greatest glass cutter in the world, but it works relatively well. They sell regular tungsten carbide cutters. Now I'm going to score this pretty heavily, trying to stay as straight as I possibly can. Now there's some debate about whether or not you go all the way. I'm not going to go all the way around. Now here's the cool part. So I'm going to take a little water here. You can use spit, I just happen to have water, and I'm going to put a little bit of water on the joint here. And I'm going to take this hot rod, this rod here, then I'm going to get it nice and cherry red. Actually, it's going to be completely molten. And then I'm going to hit the seam with it. And I'm going to hit it with a little water. Oh, it didn't crack. I'll do it again. It doesn't work. It doesn't always work immediately the first time. It would have been nice if it did, but it didn't. Just like that. So once you score the glass, you've created a flaw in it, and it just runs the flaw. This one didn't actually cut perfectly. Usually what happens is it'll cut almost perfectly straight. Now, for pulling points, I like to have a little setup going, like a kind of like a production line here. So over to the right here, you can't see it off screen, I have an old mesh garbage bag, or can, which works pretty well for this project. I don't like to use closed containers because I need these things to cool off relatively quickly. Now, I found that for this torch to produce the type of points that I want or need, I'll turn the propane on, I turn the center oxygen on, I turn the outside links oxygen on, and then I just very barely crack the outer fire oxygen, and I don't know if it'll show up on camera because I don't feel like fiddling with the exposure. But so the candles are about this long, and then I crack the outer fire, or the outer oxygen, and it pulls the candles in, because there's actually a cone of oxygen going over the flame. You can't get this flame just using these two oxygens. You just can't do it. And in this center fire oxygen, or I'm sorry, this outer fire oxygen, the center one, it makes it do weird things. All those flames have their uses, but in this particular case, we don't need any of those. This is the flame that I want to pull points with, for this size material. Now, if I was pulling points off a larger material, I'd use a totally different flame. I like my points, I like the heat for my points to be about half the diameter, or half the width of the diameter, if that makes sense. So this tubing is 1 inch in diameter, or 26 millimeters. So I like my point, or I like my, where I'm heating this, to be about half of an inch at its center, and then the heat dissipates to the left and the right maybe another quarter of an inch. So in reality, I'm getting a 1 inch heated section, but only the half inch of the center is molten, if that makes any sense. I can't get a better camera angle, and I don't feel like wearing a headgear to do it. If I could get a filter, a better filter system for my GoPro, I probably would do that. I'd wear a head camera. Okay, so getting it hot, I'm getting it hot. Now you kind of have to be careful, because once it starts to get molten, you don't want your hands to move in or out. You want your hands to stay pretty much in the same orientation. Because if you do that, what happens is you'll make up what's called a Maria. And we don't want a Maria, we want to go in, we don't want to go out. A Maria is out. I don't know what the in is, but a reduction, I guess, I don't know. So we're getting this good and hot. Now, normally the camera angle is kind of screwy here, so to see it on camera, I have to change it. Now, in front of me, I have my fan and in a window with straight lines on it. And I'll use the straight lines to know whether or not I'm pulling a straight point. So, now, I'm pulling this out. I'm gonna give it a little spin to make sure gravity isn't fighting me. This material is so thin, these tubes are so small in diameter, I can actually pull 2 points at one time. With larger diameter material, it takes a lot longer for the heated section here to cool down, and I have a tendency to get jerky points on one side or the other. So I only pull 1 point at a time. Now, I'm going to take and I'm going to blow into this end and create a hole in there. Create a hole in there. And I'm going to set these aside. This is a piece of it's not Dura-Rock, it's I forget what it is. It's not Dura-Rock, there's another name for it. It's HardieBacker. The HardieBacker is really nice because it doesn't have any stones or rock in it. Dura-Rock isn't very good for this. It doesn't get really cold. It kind of stays. The steel on my bench is freezing cold. If I set a piece of glass down on the bench when it's freezing cold, it'll instantaneously crack. Oh, forgot. So we'll pull this one. Again, another thing is I should probably start that out there, but I just jammed it right into the heat. I lucked out. It is a little cold in here today, so I'm kind of throw a little more heat into this. So I got to be careful. The same thing that breaks the glass when you score it and heat shock it will crack the glass. One of the reasons I don't do what I just did, which is to create a smaller piece, is the non-flame polished ends of the glass where I scored it and cut it can from time to time crack at the end. So what happened, it'll continue cracking. So what can happen sometimes when you score and crack, or when you score and cut, or I've had it happen more often with saw cut pieces, is you'll get a crack that runs the length of the tube, which is problematic because for a lot of reasons. One is you end up with a piece of glass that's split in the middle in your hand and broken. So that's an issue, and it's a waste of material. The profile tubing is the most notorious for doing that for me. If the ends are not nice and square on the profile tubing, it has a tendency to run. The crack will run all the way down the length of the tube, and that's money in the trash. So again, I'm heating, spinning. Everything has to do with spinning. You can't stop spinning. The second you stop spinning, things droop. And then when it droops, you're kind of done. Normally when I do this, and I'm not going to do it now, is I'll pull this up over my head a little bit, but it'll be out of frame. So I'm going to give it a second to cool. I'm going to pull it down. Oh, it got cold on me. There's a delicate balance between the perfect temperature to pull and not. This actually worked out. You can't take it right out of the flame and yank a point into it. It doesn't work. Yeah, it pulls the point way too thin. And I'm pulling on this pretty hard just to keep it straight. Even though it's not glowing, the glass is actually still moving. And this is how flexible the glass is. You can see that's not because it's hot. It's because it's just that thin. Glass is shockingly flexible up until it breaks. So I'm gonna stick these over here. I also kind of need to be careful. I don't necessarily want the ends I don't want these ends here to touch, because sometimes that'll cause strip fractures also. Oh, you dummy. Alright, now. I just wipe boogers on my clean rag. I don't need it. Okay. Let's do another one here. So I'll sit here for hours, like today, and I'll take all of this glass. I have 3 tubes here that are 24 inches long, give or take a little, and I will sit here and just do this all day until I get until this can is full. Actually, the can to my right here will be full of these things. And then once that can is full, then I'll start making Christmas ornaments. And I'll actually physically start making the ornaments themselves. One of the things with pulling points, especially, well, for me, is the temptation to throw too much heat into the glass. I am not skilled enough to do this with any bit of a hotter flame than I'm using now. If I use a hotter flame, the glass will actually melt too fast for me to control it. That's kind of one of the tricks. That's one of the things that you have to learn, is what's the sweet spot. What's the sweet spot? Now, the nice part about this particular glass that I bought is that the wall thickness it's just a little bit thicker than the 1 inch. So this is 26 millimeter. 1 inch is a little bit smaller than 26 millimeter. The wall thickness was very similar, but the diameter is a little bigger, so it changed the way that I actually have to work with this stuff. You don't realize it until you do a couple hundred of them, how quickly you become acclimated to whatever size product that you're working on. It takes me probably 10 points to get good at it. So there'll be a couple cattywampy ones today, I promise. Alright. Pretty rigid there. I have to remember which end is cut, because the last thing I want to do is cut my face, or cut my lip. Voicing experience. I'll also actually snap those blown ends off before I start working with them. You'll notice I'm cleaning the glass pretty much every time before I put it in the heat. If you don't clean your glass, you end up with inclusions that just won't come out. Another thing that I need to do, and I am incredibly guilty of this, is I should keep my bench a lot cleaner than I do. My bench, between smoking and just broken glass laying on the bench, you know, I've got silver. I stopped using a sparker because the sparker was actually leaving little tiny flecks of sparker on the bench. So if I drop something on my bench, it would immediately get sparker dust in it, and the sparker dust leaves inclusions in the glass that I don't ever see, and I don't see it until it's I don't see the inclusions until they come out of out of the kiln, and then I'm like, well, I got a ruined piece. I ruined a piece yesterday. I dropped it on the bench. I wasn't thinking, well, I was thinking I'm pissed off I dropped the marble on the bench. And I finished the marble. I was finishing the marble when I dropped it on the bench. And I picked the marble up with a hot rod. I pick the marble up, I throw it back in the flame, I polish off punt marks, I throw it in the kiln. Well, this morning I came out and grabbed that particular marble out of the kiln. I'm looking at it, and there's a little black dot on it right in the spot where you kind of look at it. So that marble is now, that one goes in the $5 bin. Oh, the $5 bin. Alright, so now I'm getting there. This heavy wall, this new glass is definitely a little challenging for me because it is different. And one of the things I need to do is not pull the points so far either. That's another. I don't need a 3-foot long point to make a 6-inch long Christmas ornament. Glass is incredibly stretchy when it's wet. So with enough heat and enough flame, literally could run, 2 guys can heat this. That's how they make the rods, actually, the color rods, all of them. Yeah, that's how they make the color rods, is you'll get 2 guys, they'll heat a big blob of glass, and then they'll both grab one end and run apart. And those rods can be 20 feet long. Chair is not happy either today. So now, the other reason I don't like to work with the shorter than 2-foot lengths is what I'm running into right now, which is I can't get as many points out of a cut piece of glass. That's why I only cut one of these. The cut, the more cuts in the glass, the more you waste. So when I use a 24-inch piece, for the sake of argument, it's like a 32-inch piece, I only lose 2 ornaments. So every cut costs me an ornament, and that's I don't want that. I can't have that. So all of my ornaments are basically about the same size, and the way that's achieved is by pulling points that are basically the same size. Occasionally I'll have one that's a little long. Pull that out. Give it a second to pull off. Pull it out. Now, that one's going to be crooked. Once you get one crooked point, basically that whole, everything else that comes off of this point here is going to be crooked. Not a lot, but enough that I'll notice it. And it can cause problems down the road, but that's a relatively straight point. It's got a weird, has a crack in it. And there's a weird little mark in there. You won't notice, I won't notice it. Not with a Christmas ornament. Now basically that's just what I'll do all day today, is I will sit here and pull all these into little points. And hopefully they'll all be about the same size. see. I mean, I like my points to be, for this particular type of work, I like my points to be the diameter of the glass. So if the glass is 1 inch in diameter, I want my working area to be about the diameter of the glass. It's just my own personal preference. It helps with consistency in heating and consistency in manufacture. You have to remember, when I'm making these, I'm making several hundred at a time. And once you get into the groove of it, once you get into the flow, I don't necessarily want to throw any wrenches into the works by having an overly long one or an overly short one, or long is usually a bigger issue than short. You don't want any that are crooked. If you can avoid it, you're going to get crooked. I get crooked ones, I can't help it. Pulling points is kind of cathartic. And it's a necessary part of the job. I can't work off of a full length of tubing. And I've seen guys do it on a lathe. They'll stick a piece of tubing in and make 10 or 15 things, and they'll never pull a point on it. They don't need to because they're in a lathe. You'll notice every once in a while I'll blow on the center. I don't know if that does any good. That one's not bad. As long as you keep tension on it and spinning, because I'm spinning, I only stop for a split second to get it to start to pull. And then once it starts to pull, I keep tension on it. So that's like one of the tricks. So there we go. These two are pretty close to the same size. This one is a little preferable, but that's about what I want. And I want as many of those to be that diameter or that length as possible. Now you'll notice I am blowing out. As soon as I pull the point out, I'll blow a hole in this end. If I don't do that, well, you end up with a sealed tube, and a sealed tube can be problematic. As soon as you start to put heat on it, there's actually a vacuum inside of there. It's a heat vacuum. You know, the air inside the tube expands, it evacuates out of the tube. You seal the tube, voila, instant vacuum. It's not a complete vacuum, by any stretch of the imagination, but it's enough of a vacuum that when I go to heat it again, it'll suck in, or, well, it does both. It sucks in or it blows up. Because as soon as you start heating the glass, you're heating the air inside, you're heating the vacuum inside, which is where it's no longer a vacuum when you heat it, and then you'll end up with a blowout, which happens. I mean, I make enough of these every day. I make enough that eventually I'll get one where I don't do it. Especially if I'm sitting here yapping to the camera, or somebody calls me, or I get distracted, I already have inclusion in this one, so I didn't wipe it off before I started working. Alright, so that's points 101, basically. And it's the number one thing that you have to learn if you want to learn how to do lamp working. It's the number one thing that you have to learn how to do pretty much off the bat. There's two things that you need to learn. One is how to pull a point. The other is how to make a ball. And making a ball is very important. It's just like one of the number one things. One of the downfalls of using that is it does occasionally, something's going on here. it will occasionally put soot on the glass, and you don't want soot on your glass. I turned my torch up a little bit because for whatever reason it takes a minute or two for everything to equalize. When the torch starts to heat up, and this torch doesn't necessarily heat up, but it does get warmer, it'll change the flame characteristics just slightly. The radiant heat coming off of the glass impacts the torch face, so that changes the flow of gas. To be very careful, and because I heated the torch up, it changed the dynamic. So, and every time you change your dynamic, you have to adapt to it. But that's almost a perfect length and width there. I'm gonna wait for those to cool down a little. So you'll notice I have like I found that like 5 or 6 tubes, 5 or 6 points that I start out with are like the perfect number to keep rolling. And the Pyrex cools very fast. It cools very fast, and it doesn't crack when it does it. That's one of the great things about Pyrex. If I was doing this with what's called soft glass, these would have probably already cracked. Like the second you throw heat back onto them, they crack. And Pyrex doesn't do that. Now, granted, this is full of stress because of the difference in wall thickness. That stress goes away after the ornament is actually made, because the wall thickness thins out. So if I was to put this under a polariscope, the point ends would be stress points. There we go, that's much better. You can't rush. You just can't. You need to take your time. There's no rush. You've got plenty to make. Now, this one's a little long, but that's okay. Now, at the end of the day, a little bit of variation is okay. You just don't want ones that are like this long or this long and that long, and then it just doesn't work out for me. That, and I'm looking to maximize the amount of ornaments that I get out of a tube. Generally get about, I get about 30 out of a 32-inch or 34-inch tube. So it's 60 out of a 5-foot long tube, give or take a little bit. And that's kind of the key, is maximizing the amount of ornaments that I get out of the materials that I have on hand. I also I'll recycle a lot of color. I have a little jar over there that's full of color, little chunks of color that I have laying around. And then they're like the little leftover nubbins off of my stringers. The little leftover nubbins off my stringers, I'll heat those up and, you know, stick them on the ornaments. And then at the very end, when all is said and done, and I can't get any more ornaments out of those little nubbins of glass, I'll melt them into, I call them $5 beads, because they're $5 beads. I got a whole box full of those that I take out. First, I take to the shows and I put them out and I let the kids play with them, or I sell a good number of them. They're all very unique. I don't know, if I had one little girl, I bought 10 of them off of me. You can use them. I mean, there's nothing. They are what they are. They're just little amulets. Some of my more intricate ones. Now they're not $5. They're in the $20 range, but they're also pre-planned items. And all those are available through me. Eventually I'd like to get a distributor for that stuff. I'm quite frankly tired of selling my own stuff. After a few hundred of these, I get pretty good at them not being crooked. The trick is this point here, where you don't want it. If you cut this too soon, one end will droop. If you screw it up, both ends will droop. I'm going to throw a little bit more heat in this to widen the flame a little bit. Not a lot, just a little. Once I get this flame set, that's the other reason I pull all my points at one time, because once the flame is set and I'm getting perfect points, or at least pretty close to perfect points, I can just roll right through them. I don't have to fiddle with anything. Now I'm going to say that's going to be the end of the video here, but I'm not going to shut the camera off. So there's the how to pull points video, and how I do, like, where my raw product, how I start with a raw product and end up with a finished Christmas ornament. I'm not going to make a Christmas ornament right now because, like I said, my flame is set for points, and I'm just going to sit here and I'm just going to pull points. Actually, you know what I might do? I might pull one. I might see if I can get it to crack, to show you what happens when it cracks. I don't necessarily want it to crack, but I have one piece over here that looks like it wants to crack. So what I'm looking at is actually the wall thickness in the melted material. So as it melts, you can actually watch the wall thickness change. In my particular case, it's getting thick, and then when it gets to a certain point where it's nice and thick and even on the inside, then I pull it. It's very difficult to explain, and I have yet. Alright, so this one might run. Let's see. This is going on. Now I'm going to heat this up. Oh, there it goes. So I'm going to heat this up here, and then I'm going to. What's the one here? Ha! My rest is just got screwy on me. That's a fantastic way to get this to crack also, by the way, is to put it in the heat and then take it out of the heat and then put it back in the heat. There we go. Now I'm using the rest here just so I can get a little consistency. It actually didn't crack, which is nice. It did crack a little bit, but it didn't run the whole length of the tube. Usually what it'll do is it'll make a little U in the tube, and then I'll lose I'll lose more than I want to. Now this is the upside of the Marver here on the top of my torch, is now that I have this glass, it's starting to come in on itself. Now before I had the Marver, I had to put it on the table, so I lost a lot of heat. But now I can just stick it in here, keep spinning it, and it's going to bring the tubing end in to like a cone, which is what I want. I want it to be a relatively consistent cone all the way to the end here. Now I haven't adjusted my flame, I'm still using the same flame, I'm just a little bit further out in it because my rest won't get any closer to my torch, which is not really an issue. Now you got to be careful because if you get it too hot and you spin it too fast, centrifugal force will actually open that cone back up. And you don't want that. We're trying to close the cone, not open the cone. Alright, I'm going to give it a little bit more. I'm going to get it to close up just a tad bit more. Now I'm changing the angle also here, so it's going to want to close in on itself, and I'm going to go a little bit slower. You can actually, one of the fascinating things to me with glass blowing is being able to watch the material move. You know, watching it go from a solid to a semi-solid to like chewing gum to liquid or honey to liquid is pretty fascinating. And then the fact that it gets hard almost instantly is also pretty cool to me. Alright, so I haven't actually closed the end of this all the way, and I don't want to, because I'm trying to maximize the amount of material that I have. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to wink, there we go. Now, I'm going to spin this, I'm going to take it off the rest here and spin it straight. So right in front of me, and you can't see it on camera, and I've said it, there's a window in front of me that has straight lines on it, and that's actually what I'm looking at. So my left and my right hand, that's fairly straight. Now, the other thing, you'll notice that I'm keeping it vertical. That's because gravity's your friend. Heat this up. Now, what happens with these, you're going to see it in a second, I actually end up with too much glass on the left side here, so I'm going to end up with this like really weird long piece. Alright, now we're going to pull a point on it, pull it out of the flame, give it a pull. Now I'm going to use gravity to help me, because remember I've got this blob on the other side here that's fighting me. Usually, and it did it this time too. Usually when I close these off like this, I get this one on the left here is going to be cattywampy, and that's exactly what happened. And then there's that long ass piece of glass that I got to get rid of. So I have a jar full of water in front of me. Now it doesn't want to break. To shock the glass. It doesn't always work, so I have another waste pin. I got a waste pin on the left side here. There it goes. Snaps it right off. Now, one of the things that you have to do every time, here's that 3mm, is when you snap it off like that, you have to repolish the end. You never want to have a piece of glass that has a broke end on it. You want all your ends to be polished. Even this 3mm, I'm just gonna knock the chunks off of it, because you get air bubbles in it. Alright, so I'm gonna set this aside. Set this aside because I might need it. I'm gonna need it. This one might break. Now this one has this one's got a chunk, an inconsistent chunk. This is what I was talking about with every time I have a cut, I lose an ornament. So basically this cut and the cut on the other side of this, it's made a cut, was an ornament that I can't make now because it's not there. The glass needs to be used to make an end. Now sometimes when I have a piece like this, depending on how long it is, if this was a little bit shorter, I would probably use this to make beads with. You know, I'd have a bead I would just, this is one of the rare occasions where I don't use a point to make something. I'll have a point on this end, and then I'll have a sealed end on this end. I'll make my bead, I'll cut it off with the torch, and then I'll have another sealed end, and I'll just keep making implosion beads until I run out of glass. Now another thing, and this is one of the reasons that I wear these heat shields on my hands, on these heat sleeves on my hands, is there's condensate building up on the inside of this glass. Now glass by itself, Pyrex in particular, is a very good insulator, fiberglass insulation. The problem is the point itself, this end that's in my right hand, is very thin. So as the condensate inside of the glass starts to vaporize, turn to steam, it runs up the point and burns the living hell out of my hand. So that's why I have the heat shield. My fingers are pretty much dead anyway, so that the heat doesn't really bother my fingers, but it really bothers the palm of my hand, especially where I rest the glass in here. So that's the other reason I wear the heat shields. Pull that out, make it straight. Now if it's slowly heats and slowly vaporizes and slowly goes away, it's usually, it's imperceptible. But every once in a while, I'll get a nice big ass blob of spit in there. It happens on the larger diameter tubing more often than the smaller diameter tubing, but it'll get so hot, it literally becomes superheated steam, and I can't hold it. So that causes its own set of problems. Once it flashes, usually I can't hold it. Even my fingers here that are super asbestos-y, don't burn, blah blah blah. I'm at fun at parties, and did it again. Now another question that I get a lot is, what do you do with your excess glass? Well, the truth of the matter is I throw it away. It's just not worth it. First of all, this glass will ruin a recycled bin. Even though the glass that they put in a recycle bin is generally turned into fiberglass insulation or fiber filler. It's not actually used for glass ever again. Glass as we think of as glass. It's not. They're not making drinking bottles out of it or drinking glasses or any of that stuff. They're lying to you. It gets superheated and then turned into insulation or something. It is not being turned back into consumer products that we think of when we think of glass. Imagine that. You're being lied to. So I just throw it away. I don't have the facilities here or the wherewithal to melt this material back into anything else. Theoretically, I could separate the clear from the color, which I actually do anyway, but the Marver gets really hot, and if I try to light a cigarette off of it and I bump my chin on the Marver, I burn the shit out of my chin. I could smash this glass into a zillion little teeny tiny pieces. I could put it in a ball mill. I could turn it into dust. I could then take the dust, or it's called frit or cullet, and put it into a crucible and remelt it into glass. Or I could use the frit / cullet for something. I don't know what, but I mean I could use clear frit. That's exactly what it would be. It would just be clear glass dust. Like maybe throw it into my glass beading machine or whatever. But the truth of the matter is, it's trash. Truth of the matter is, it's trash. It's not worth recycling. Now, if I do get a broken Christmas ornament, or I'll have, when I'm all done with this, I'll have a whole bunch of little nubbins of color, or I'll have, usually what happens is I'll have a whole bunch of like these 8mm rods that are all about 6 inches long. Now, those I will melt back together into longer rods, and I'll keep doing that until I can't do it anymore. So there is some recycling done, but if I get a bead that cracks, or you just throw it away. It's just not worth saving some things. It is infinitely recyclable. Another thing that I should mention is that Pyrex is a different coefficient of expansion than soda lime glass. So what happens when you do that is you make more problems. For yourself. My shop, I have some flat glass laying around here, and it is not and the flat glass is soda lime glass. It's window glass, and that's in a completely different section of my shop. Now this end is flame polished. From the factory, both ends of the tubes, my experience is that both ends of the tubes are flame polished, which is really nice because that has less of a tendency to crack on you. So I'm not afraid that this is going to crack. I mean, I've had them crack, but it's not something that normally happens. So same routine over and over and over again. And I said I'll be doing this probably till lunchtime today, and then I'm kind of alone here. It's just me and the dogs until tomorrow, so I may just keep rolling here and get all these done. Go grab another aluminum tray and bring it out here and just crank out. Every point that you see here is going to get turned into a Christmas ornament unless something fails with the ornament, which does happen occasionally. I'll have a breakage whilst I'm making them. If I have a breakage while I'm making an ornament, those get turned into $5 beads. Or if I get one where it's the colors don't look right, or I don't know, you get for every 100 or so that I make, I get probably 10 duds. The shape is funny. If I'm experimenting with shape and form, I might get one that just looks bad and doesn't make the cut. And then it'll get melded into a bead, and then it'll get sold to some little girl at a craft show for $5 or a little old lady, or I'll just give them away. I give a lot of them away. That's why I'll never be rich. Now I'm not pushing on this glass at all. I'm just using the gravity, the weight of the glass itself on the marble here. And it's moving. Trust me, it's moving. So there's a crack. As soon as I heated it, the rod cracked, which creates that, which creates its own problem. Because I'm tossing this end anyway, I'm not going to go crazy flame polishing it. Now this is where 2 torches come in handy, because I have the point is in, it's called the back flame, to keep it warm, and then I was polishing the rod. Yes, I'm polishing my rod. Fire, heat it back up. To be honest, I don't know how I live without this, without the rest or the marble. These have been fantastic additions to my setup here. I know how I did it, I just did without. And it makes a significant difference. Now here's a great, let's see if it'll do it. Didn't do it. Let's see if I can make it steam. No, there's, oh, there it goes. Didn't do it. So there's condensation in here in the tube. It causes its own set of problems. I'm going to heat that out of there. If it dries in the tube, which it often does, it will, it stains the inside of the tubing. When I come across one of those points that is stained on the inside, those will be the ones that get coated in blue frit, or I'll put a lot of color in them so you don't see the staining. It's minerals, you know, it's from whatever disgusting slime is coming out of my mouth, or out of the air. That's where the condensate comes from. One way to lessen that is to take my tubes and set them on my kiln, because my kiln is actually running right now, even though I don't need it, because it was cold in here. The best way to heat the room up is to turn the kiln on, and if I decide that you need to put something in the kiln, I can do that. But I can take these rods, or the tubes, and I'll set them on top of the kiln. The kiln gets gets pretty hot. Hot enough over time that I don't like to touch things that I've left on top of the kiln. Alright, now, there we go. And so I think I've bored everybody long enough here with how to pull points. I'm just going to throw this video up. I'm actually going to shoot 2 videos. I'm going to shoot the end right now.